Packers fans out here to stay. Cheeseheads green and gold all day. Jordan Love lead us to the bay. Every game we find a way. Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for you know. Green and gold gonna glow. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown.
Aloha and welcome back to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. Today we continue our pre-draft preview episodes with safety in the 2026 NFL Draft, and today we have Destin Adams. Thank you, Destin, for... I'm trying so hard to pronounce your name correctly, but I apologize now if I lose the vowel pronunciation. But Destin, thank you for joining us. That's right, everyone listening. It is Destin, like Destin, the city in Florida. Or at least that's how he explained it to me, and we have him on to talk safety. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, I mean you're batting 100 so far with the name. So I mean, great start. But yeah, appreciate you guys having me on. And I mean, as long as you don't get too crazy with how you get it wrong, I'll be pretty fine.
Don't worry. If anyone's getting called names, it's me by Joe. So no worries. All right, so Destin, I don't know how much Joe has told you about our usual show format for these episodes, but generally what we do is we go into the state of the Packers currently, then we go into any potential free agent moves, and then we go into the draft class. So as we'll try to keep that one as tight as we can. No real news for the Packers this week anyway, so don't have a lot to shoot the breeze over.
And I think we're going to, like I was telling Destin, now I'm going to start doing it. Thanks a lot, Mike. Before recording, I think we'll skip the free agent portion of it because we're far enough along in the off season that if they were going to make a free agent signing at the position, they would have done it already. So I think we're pretty good with just what's on roster and any additions via draft and post-draft.
Yeah, and when you look at where they sit on roster, you've got four guys who are, I don't want to say locks, but pretty certain to make the team at this point in Javon Bullard, Xavier McKinney. Javon Bullard, Xavier McKinney, Kitan Oladapo, and Evan Williams. And then outside of that, you have two future signings in Jonathan Baldwin and Mark Perry. So, I mean, you figure the Packers are going to carry five to six guys, depending on what they do at cornerback. They tend to go into the season with 10 total DBs on roster, and they've waffled between splitting it 5-5, 4-6, depending on what the numbers look like at the other position. Every once in a while, they'll carry an 11th guy if that guy is like a special teams ace or something like that. So, but the base of this room is pretty solid right now. You've got your two established starters in McKinney and Williams. Bullard is a de facto starter given how much time they spend in nickel. Bullard really stepped into his own as the nickel DB last season. And Oladapo has, he's flashed here and there when given opportunities, but it'll be interesting to see what his role is in Gannon's defense moving forward, because he's not really shown himself to be a deep half guy. He was kind of used more as a box safety in the past by oh god, he's gone and I've already forgotten his name. What's our old DC's name?
Halfley?
Halfley, thank you. Sorry, Jeff. You're gone. You're no longer our DC. So it's like college classes. It's done. Purge. So
He's Miami's problem now, right?
Yep, he's Miami's problem. But no, we do truly wish Halfley the best, because he really did a lot of good stuff for the defense over the past couple seasons, and really just interested to see what direction Gannon's going to take it in. But that's where the Packers stand now. And because we want to maximize Destin's time talking about this draft class, I mean, as it goes
the only
into...
thing I would ask Mike is, being that Destin is a Colts fan, I'm pretty sure of, based on what I've seen him write for, and of course the stuff he's got going on in the background, just an outsider's view of what the Packers have in their, what he would see as what the Packers have in their safety room right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you start to talk about it, you have to talk about Xavier McKinney first. I thought going into McKinney's free agency run, I was shocked that a guy that young and with that much ball production was being able to hit the market. You just don't see defensive backs with that type of ball production become free agents that young. And the Giants allowed it to happen. He was a guy that I know the Colts had a lot of interest in, ends up in Green Bay, and has paid off immediately. For what he's been able to do to their secondary. He really just plays that single high free safety position in a very high level. I think he's the perfect guy to bring in a young guy next to him and just raise the room of the floor. So I think looking at safety and just seeing Xavier McKinney there, like, it's hard not to have a strong opinion about what a safety duo could be if they get a draft pick right.
It's kind of funny, too, that you mentioned that, Destin, that, the Giants let it, because they kind of 2 years in a row let a pretty good safety prospect leave through free agency because, McKinney came to the Packers in the 2024 free agency cycle. And honestly, the offseason before in 2023, I wanted the Packers to sign Julian Love, who was a free agent, not the same type of ball production, but it's more like in the frame of a steady, heady guy who's not going to blow a lot of plays, and he's going to make more than he gives up, kind of thing. And so it was surprising to see New York back-to-back years kind of be like, okay, cool, we can just let this guy. And guys who Love especially didn't make I think the deal he signed with Seattle was for $5 million per year or something like that. McKinney's was a little higher, but neither one was a total break the market deal for a safety in any regards. But I think it just kind of speaks to how the league views the position and where they're at in terms of valuing, to the point where we'll just start to slowly get into draft prospects. I mean, and I'm going to bring up a guy that the Green Bay has no right being in range to take, but you're seeing it with Caleb Downs, who is the undisputed top prospect in the class. And you're finding... I knew this was going to happen because he's a safety, and there's always the... How valuable can a safety really be? All that kind of stuff. And it's you see teams talking out of reasons, or talking reasons up why he shouldn't be a top 5 pick, when really... For the longest time, I had him as a surefire, he's a top 5 player in this class just because of all the things he does. He's been on draft radar since he was at Bama as a true freshman. I mean, just, he's been a lights-out prospect. Sure, he didn't measure as well as I thought he would, physically, in terms of his size and length, but you put the film on and he pops. Joe brings up how safety isn't one of his favorite positions to scout because... half the time guys aren't on screen, or you can't tell where they are exactly on the field just because of the angles of college broadcasts. Downs, there was no mystery because he came in from out of frame like a heat-seeking missile, didn't miss tackles from depth, or when the camera pans for a deep shot, he's there to make a play on the ball. There's just no ins and outs about it. And he was a cornerstone of Bama's run to the college football playoff as a true freshman, was a cornerstone of Ohio State's defense on national championship winner, and then this past year was just still elite. And he very easily could have taken the I've done all I need to do in college. There's you don't want to Jalen Smith yourself in the lead up to the draft where you're just playing this third season out as it's just a formality more than it is, and needing to prove anything for himself. But played really well this past season. Any Ohio State issues on defense were not his fault. And, I circle this all back around to say, we talk about, it's funny because every team is we need a great safety, but then when you come to the draft, it's oh, like you hear it every year. It's like, oh, how good does a guy have to be like considered a top 10, top 5 pick as a safety? So yeah, it's one of those positions that always kind of makes me chuckle because it's like it's one of the definitive when you need it and don't have it positions, and everyone's looking for these kind of guys who can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, for me, my big board's not officially posted yet, so I guess I'm just giving you the spoiler. Like, Caleb Downs is my number 3 player in this class. So I think very talented guy. You saw a consistent level of excellence throughout his career. Is how I like to refer to him as. And I just think in a situation where are you going to take a safety top 5, like that's always just going to be a tough question to answer for a team. Like talking to scouts around the league, like it's always talked about with safeties, linebackers, running back, tight ends. Like, are you going to go a year where you had to suffer so many losses, suffer so much turmoil, end up with a top 5, top 10 pick, and then like the prize you get is a safety, a linebacker, a running back, a tight end? Like, I understand that mindset, I guess, but like for me, another position being like guard, that a lot of people just look at it in that light. To me, like, if I am in the top 10 and I'm looking at it, I just want to walk away with a win. Like, I want a hit on a prospect. Like comparing it to like Colts land. I mean, the Colts used the 6th overall pick on Quentin Nelson. That's a guard. A lot of people wouldn't look at drafting a guard in the top 10, almost the top 5, as a very sexy move. I can tell you for a fact that the Colts do not look back at that pick now and think, man, I wish we didn't take a guard, because they're probably going to have a Hall of Famer in terms of what Quentin Nelson has been and what he will continue to be. So to me, when I look at Caleb Downs, I see a dang good football player. So like to me, if I was a team in the top 5 with a guy like Caleb Downs, it wouldn't be hard for me to turn a card in.
Do you guys, and like Mike said, safety is not one of my favorite things to watch, so I'm very limited on it, but do you think it's, and this is to both you guys, do you think it's harder to hit on a safety in the top parts of the draft than it is later on? I mean, you look at some of the guys like a Jamal Adams, who was supposed to be a can't miss prospect, or go even a little bit further back, and Mark Barron for the Rams, and guys like that do get taken relatively high in the draft, but then they kind of like flame out because it didn't work. Do you guys feel it's a lot harder to hit on or a lot harder to risk it on a safety when not a lot of them are coming through on their promise, so to say?
Destin, you can take it first.
So I think the answer to me would be, I think we've seen in the last few years just how the NFL values these positions. And looking at like the end of the first round, like the value for me as if I'm looking to draft a safety and they're a fringe first round pick, like I'm probably going to let them go into day 2 and not use a pick on them, just because it's where the value makes sense. To me, if a safety has played themselves into conversations of, is this guy a top 10 player in the class? Like, there's a good reason for that, because you're just not seeing these teams talk about safeties in that light unless it's necessary. So there are a few different guys in this class that are that fringe first round, second round class, like going past the Caleb Downs, obviously. And to me, when you're in that fringe realm, like it wouldn't shock me if we see some of these guys that are getting first round love that are at that position falling into day 2, just because when you're in that 20 to 32 range, having to make sure you hit and looking at these other positions that could make more sense. I think safety, like you're saying, there's been a pretty decent hit rate of finding starters on day 2 at the position, and the contract value just lines up a little bit better with how the position is valued in general, and teams are all about getting the discounts at those power positions. It's why hitting on a day 2 receiver is like gold in the NFL right now, because that market is just taken off. So making it make more sense on the books, drafting a safety in day 2 is typically why you don't see as many go in that 20 to 32 range anymore.
Yeah, and like Destin said, it's so you brought up two really good names, Joe, in Barron and Adams. So like with Adams, so there were two guys that I was like, one like Barron I kind of liked as a prospect. Adams I was like, I thought he was way too much hype. And the big issue with the return on investment on top 10 safeties is just like you need to get the guy who can do everything. Downs is a guy who can do everything as a safety. He could play in the box if you wanted him to, but he's just elite playing at depth. And that's the thing, is that like within Adams is like you took a 5'11", 230-pound linebacker. Like for all intents and purposes, that was one of the concerns. Is it's like, yes, the highlight plays in college were awesome, but it's like, is he being used by LSU the way he is because that's what they needed him to do, or because that's what he couldn't cover kind of thing? And that was always sort of like a a Russian roulette with these kind of prospects. And it's one of those ones where you can never really know until someone makes the pick and you like play the career out and stuff. But yeah, it's one of those where, like Destin said, like you kind of brought up, Joe, the return on investment, it's not saying that these guys can't do it, but you're shooting for a smaller barn than you are for like a top left tackle prospect, or I know quarterbacks aren't even like sure things, but like just in terms of like what you can get back, it's like, okay, cool, I get. And that's why like left tackles are up there, because it's like, this guy's going to play every snap. He's going to be a focal point of every snap. Same with edge rushers, same with like defensive tackles, what have not. With a safety, it's kind of like, okay, this guy's on the field for like 90-something% of my snaps, but, yes, he's keeping the lid on my defense, but how many plays is he directly involved, and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it takes a special player. And like I said, Downs is, to me, one of the exceptions, because he fits the mold where he can be a truly transcendent prospect to pro like projection, whereas a lot of other guys, like Destin says, like, are they truly like mid first round picks, or are they getting artificially brought up? Like Clinton Dix, like there was a point where it's like, okay, like how, like, is he truly a top 15 pick back in 2014, or is he more of like a latter third of the first round pick kind of stuff? And needs, depth of the class and all is gonna change the algebra on it. But Downs is just a special case where it's like, no, like this guy should, like, it's the like, you play his career 9 times out of 10, it should work out really. You should have a multi all-pro type player and stuff. But
no, I was kind of curious of that, because if you look, in my recent mind, you see more of the first rounders flame out quicker than later rounds. Colts had one of my favorite safeties for years, Bob Sanders. He was
the GOAT.
Yeah, hey, Iowa Hawkeye alum, my guy. Even though he was like 5'0", 200 pounds, he was. I wish he would have been able to stay more healthy, because he would have had a longer, more productive career, if you can actually believe it. But he was a second rounder. The Packers had Nick Collins. He was a second rounder. Javon Bullard and Evan Williams currently for the Packers, second and fourth rounders respectfully. And the kid that I really liked last year, that I know was really liked by a lot, and I mess up his name all the time, but he was drafted by Seattle from South Carolina.
Emmanuel Ware.
Yeah, there you go. He was he fell into the second round. So it makes me wonder, and what Destin said makes a little bit more sense, that it is kind of a premium position that you want. The contracts are getting higher when they hit the free agency, so try to save your money a little bit and get a guy in the later rounds that can contribute day one. So, but then, like I said, Mike brought up Clinton Dix. He was a first rounder. He had maybe a year, another half a year on top of that where he looked good. Jamal Adams, the most that you got out of him was the Jets were able to trade him for.
Hey, great return on investment if you're New York, though. You got to
Yes.
say, if we're talking about return on investment, New York feels pretty good.
Right, and or you look at the Giants, who gave up on McKinney at the end of his rookie contract. And that's what you got to put it as, is they pretty much gave up on him because they didn't even, the way it sounded, they didn't even offer him a contract. Now, I know they
Bucky.
were kind of in cap hell and all that, but, it's still one of those things that, like Destin talked about with McKinney, how do you let a guy that's that young, that has that kind of ball skill, go and not even try to offer him anything? So it makes me wonder how people view, and not to say anything against Downs. I'll be honest, I didn't watch anything on Downs because I knew he was way out of the reach of the Packers. The Packers would have had to do like a Mike Ditka for Ricky Williams type trade to even consider getting to a spot to take him, unless our famous saying goes, a gas mask bong video pops out, or he goes.
They already tried. They already tried with the whole
generative
red
knee, right?
flags coming out of
Yeah.
the combine that everyone brought up. I mean, I don't think it's happening. I think Caleb Downs is going to be a first round pick. I think Caleb Downs is going to end up being a top 20 pick probably. And if he fell out of that, then that'd be pretty shocking to me. Very good player. I don't think we have to worry about a bong video coming out pre-draft though.
Well, the other thing that can mess him up is the Lyle Collins route, where he gets brought into questioning because of an ex-girlfriend getting murdered, and you fall completely out of the draft because everybody's wondering why you're getting called into the police, and it was just because he was dating her at the time.
Yeah, so like I said, I think he's going to be a first round pick.
Yep. The odds on are pretty good there. But
Right. So yeah, that's why I didn't watch any of him, because it's like, if he's consensus top of the draft pick, Packers don't have a first round pick for the next 2 years. It's not even feasible.
Yep. So Green Bay is sitting there at 52. Safety, I put it in the bin just for the Packers, just below wide receiver and tight end, where it's not a pressing need because you look to have hit on Bullard and Williams. The one area where I do think they need to plan for the future a bit is, McKinney is, I think he's 20, this is going to be his year 28 season. So, he's not old, but, he's in the middle of his second contract, his seventh season in the NFL. And you want to start to, at least prepare for the future kind of thing. And the one thing they don't have is a second guy who can truly play post safety. I know Gannon's going to do, he's not going to just sit there and cover 3 the whole time or anything like that, but you do want to have, I feel like, one more body who can play post safety, because Williams, we saw a bunch of times this season where he struggled to get over in deep half coverage, to get to the sideline from his deep half responsibility. And Bullard has always been better as a line of scrimmage guy than he has been as a deep safety in the pros, at least. So you want to see, that would be the one area where I'm kind of like, do they look to add someone? But
well, and I'll add to that, Mike. If you go look, and I know Easton Butler has done a tremendous job of keeping track of who the Packers have met with, for pre-draft. They've been meeting with a lot of safeties comparatively to what they have on roster. I mean, there's at least a dozen of them that they've met in the pre-draft, and that's all the way from the beginning with Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, all the way down to now the top 30 visits, that they've been talking to a lot of safeties. So it makes you wonder if, the Packers do tend to, go a year ahead instead of a year behind on some of their draft picks, that 52 rolls around, maybe if a certain person is there, they make a play for him, maybe like the kid from Arizona that Stukes, is that his name? I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Well, excuse me.
The cornerback safety hybrid.
Yeah, where they could possibly play him as corner, but he also could play safety. I'd hate to go like that, because we've had a rough time of it with the Demarius Randall botch that happened many years ago, that I would hate to go that route. But if he's sitting there and they like him and they're thinking a year in advance, could that be the pick at 52? But, that's what I got to throw in there.
Yeah. So, Destin, you're sitting there at 52. Like I said, it's going to take kind of the board falling a certain way, and maybe Green Bay treating safety as a bigger need than a lot of us outside of the Packers room thinking it to be, but who are some names that you're looking at in that range that you'd be pleasantly surprised or pleasantly happy with if Green Bay, you're the Green Bay GM and you're like, oh, like a safety prospect has fallen into my lap here at 52.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked about it a little bit earlier with like how I view those fringe first round safeties. Like to me, when you're getting that type of buzz, like you could go at the end of the first round, you could fall to pick 55. Like it just really depends on how those teams are going to view safeties. So to me, like if I'm a team sitting like the Packers in the 50s as your first pick, like I'm not ruling out any of these safeties not getting to me other than Caleb Downs. Like I just don't think any of these other guys you're going to look at them and say they're an absolute lock to go in the first round, especially in a class like this where most of them aren't going to have first round grades anyway. Most scouts that I've talked to sit around the 9 to 12 first round grades total in this draft class. So it's very plausible that these safeties are not one of those 9 to 12. And if that's the reality, then you're looking at a possibility of some of these guys falling into your lap, which is the perfect wording that Mike just used. So to me, like that's when I'm not using a second round pick on safety if I'm the Packers, unless a guy like Dylan Thieneman falls in my lap and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren falls in my lap. Two guys that I think have enough talent to where if they win at the end of first round, it would not shock me. But I think they have some holes in their game that would make them not be a first round grade for a lot of teams, where if they fall in the second round, the thought of putting one of those two guys next to a McKinney in the safety room, like I think that has potential to be one of the best in the league. And if that is how you view it, and I think a new defensive coordinator coming in, there's always the possibility of seeing some of these young guys that have not gone into full-time starting roles that are locks to be starters for the next 5 years. And I think you're looking at the Packers room and you see a couple of those guys. So I think if you get one of those guys at that pick, I would not rule it out personally.
Now, I have a question about McNeil Warren to you, because he was one guy that I popped up on my screen because I think the Packers did meet with him in one of the earlier processes. I watched him. I said his coverage looks good. Obviously he's not a blazer with his speed, but he was pretty. He was
Do you want to put
decent.
them on? Do you
No,
wanna
I don't
wear
want to
them?
put him on, Daddy. Sorry, I had to do it. But anyway, he had the Peanut Tillman knack for punching out the ball. I know he was known for that, and he's got good size. But the one thing that bothered me was I wasn't sold on his tackling. Where are you with his tackling? Because it just seemed like he was more interested in I'm gonna punch the ball out than let's get the guy down on the ground and not worry about him getting any more yardage.
Yeah, so for me, I think one of the most common things you're going to see in non-day one draft picks in every draft cycle at positions like linebacker, safety, corner, is you're going to see poor tackling listed as a con. It
Right.
happens often, and I think to me it's always really big to look for what's causing the poor tackling. So for me, the red flags when that's a con for you, and it's because of effort, and it's because of just not putting in the effort to make a tackle, and you can see that their priorities are elsewhere. Like that's a big con to me, because that's not just coaching. That's going to be changing a kid's mindset and
Right.
how they're playing the position, right? So for me, I don't feel like McNeil Warren's issue is effort. I think a lot of what he has dealt with has been technique issues, which as long as you believe in your defensive coaching staff, I think that's perfect. That's the kind of guy that's going to fall a little bit because he's not that perfect, well-rounded prospect that they feel like is ready to play right away. He needs a little bit of coaching. That's what you're going to see scouts right. And to me, I think that's what it is with McNeil Warren. I feel like the technique has he's polished a little bit.
Right.
You mentioned the peanut punches and that being something that he wanted to go for a lot. To me, when I was watching his game, one of the things I wrote down is it really felt like that was like almost robotic for him. Like it may have been something his coaches wanted him to do at a very high rate, most likely because of trying to get the ball, trying to turn it over at a high rate, and just making that such a focus for him. I don't feel like that has to be his first priority at the pro level. So I'm really interested to see where he lands, because I think if you can coach up that technique a little bit, I think he has a really good base to be a really good tackler in the NFL.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's what it seemed like to me when I was watching it, was that it was more like he wanted to do the punch than he wanted to do the wrap up. So if they can get him out of, not necessarily take away the punch from him per se, but to get him to want to focus on the tackle first and the punch second, then it could be something else. And but that was really and outside of, he's not a blazer when it comes to fast. He didn't really run the best 40 for a safety, but then again, you look at Xavier McKinney, and he ran a 4.5, 4.6 40, so he's not a blazer either. But yeah, that was my only knock on him. You got anything, Mike? Or are you
No,
still
same thing.
Okay.
No, I was just gonna come in with you and talk about, but Destin really did answer it. That yeah, it does seem like it's a matter of showing up some technique on his tackling.
Sorry,
Me.
folks. This we're recording on Easter Sunday, and Mike is probably in the midst of still dealing with Easter stuff. So
counting, but no, he is a fun prospect to watch on film. He's one of those does a little bit of everything, and as a safety prospect, and it does bring the question up of like, okay, which one of these roles is his true NFL projection, or can he truly do a little bit of everything? And that's what the scouts and GMs are paid the big bucks for, is to identify, you need to find guys who have at least one NFL trait. Obviously, the more they have, that's how you get up higher in the draft, or just better return on investment. But, as much as I said I'd prefer a guy who can play post safety to kind of back up and learn from McKinney, at the same time, if you find another guy who can play in the box and is just a much bigger body, McNeil Warren, he stands just over 6'3" and a half, and he has 32-inch arms. Like, one of the problems with the Packers in zone coverage is like linebackers not getting to proper depth, or the guys who do get to proper depth, they're just built like tree stumps. And it's, that was the problem with like, excuse me, McDuffie playing linebacker last season. Is like, yeah, Isaiah was in the right spots, but it's like, if you're at 10 foot or 10-yard depth with Isaiah McDuffie, a good quarterback is just going to put the ball 2 yards over his head, and there's nothing he can do about it. Whereas, if you're a little taller, a little more athletic, maybe you tighten down those throwing windows a little better than what McDuffie can give you. So, there's degrees to this, and I do think there is a world where McNeil Warren plays a solid role on the Packers defense this season. It's just one of those little bit more squint to see it, because he's kind of crossing over on two roles you're already covered in Bullard and Williams. And at the same time, Williams has missed time in each season due to some soft tissue injuries. And Bullard, yes, he bounced back his sophomore season, but you also have to find out how real or not real that bounce back was. So you can never have enough good players at every position. So you're only going to find out when you have the guys in the room. So, definitely a good option there, especially, the disclaimer we always have is, given if the board at edge, D-tackle, corner, the quote-unquote truer needs for the Packers has dried up at 52, there's guys who are available for the Packers at other positions. Now let's flip the tables, and Destin, we're in the third round, let's say, and, the Packers are kind of scratching their head at what to do there, because the board is not super promising, as, the three positions I listed earlier. Tight ends aren't looking great either. That said, if the Packers decide, let's go safety, who is a prospect you're not in love with in the day 3 of this draft?
In the third round or day 3? Sorry, what was that?
Or sorry, in the third round. Day 2, third round.
Okay. So a third round talent that I'm not in love with for Green Bay, or that I'm just not in love with in this class?
You can go either way.
Okay.
Yeah.
To me, round 2 and round 3 is like such a gray area in this class. Like, I almost feel like it's the same thing. It's just going to be about preference, especially at safety. There's like so many different guys here. So to me, like, if I had to pick one that's like I personally have struggled to get there with him. I guess I'll say Michael Taft from Texas. Like he's a guy that like I know a lot of people have looked at as a late round 2, early round 3 type of guy. When I watch his film, like I think he has a lot of good coverage instincts. I'm a little bit worried, I guess, about if he's going to come in day one and just be able to be a man-to-man type guy in certain schemes at that position. And do I really feel like I want to drop him back as the single high safety yet? So having those 2 question marks makes me a little bit worried to where I wouldn't use a day 2 pick on him. But I really do think a lot of this safety class, the depth and the gold of this class, in my opinion, is on day 3.
Yeah, I kind of watched a little bit of him, and I immediately stopped, and I was trying to pull up his Raz card real quick because I think I had Brian Maffey running through my head a lot when I was reading these draft cards, and the big thing the Packers, and this is well known not just out from Maffey, but Maffey seems to be the one that points it out, is the 3-cone. You know, the Packers have a specific 3-cone for all their players that they have to hit, and I think that was one of his weaker spots for his testing. So I was watching him. I believe I read his Raz card and saw his 3-cone. I was like, well, nope, that's it.
It's interesting because like McKinney is a guy who kind of falls on the fringe of where the Packers would they take him, would they not take him and stuff. And people are like, oh well, they signed him, but I'm like, they're more willing to sign guys in free agency who they wouldn't necessarily draft because they're like, okay, this guy has proven in the NFL that he is, whether it's between the ears or whether just the test, he's not a good tester, whatever it is, that his on-field play is what is showing up on film. You can say whether that's a good or a bad strategy, but that is just the way they approach it. Is they're like, if you have specific, it's like short cornerbacks, i.e. Ahmad Carroll, the 3-cone drill, you could pick between Quinton Rollins, whatever. You have several examples in the past decade or so for Packers draft picks. There's a reason that they don't like guys who have above 7-second 3-cones because, as much as people are like, well, how often do you do that in an NFL game? Well, the thing is that as a DB, you're forever with your shoulder, you want to be square to the line of scrimmage, and you're forever changing direction based on, which way the quarterback looks, which way the receiver that's in your zone is going, and you have to be able to flip your hips on a dime, and that's what the 3-cone is expressing in terms of a test. And to circle back to what Joe is saying is like, everyone's like, oh, like, what does it mean that this guy's outside the parameters? The parameters are set for like, okay, like, this guy is like a 7.02, for example. And it's like, where do you draw the line? It's like, okay, in the 4th round, I'm okay making that gamble because, you're based on the film production versus where you're taking the guy, you just can't pass that prospect up anymore. Whereas if it's a, it's just one of those, like I said, and whereas McKinney, where you look at some of his testing scores and you're kind of like, oh, like, his cards kind of got some yellow and red that the Packers normally don't touch, but it's like, yeah, but he's shown that he still has the range, the ball production, the eye discipline, that he leverages all his athleticism to be a extremely ball hockey safety on the back end of a defense. So, long-winded explanation around, the Packers are a team where they stick to their parameters on draft night, but don't let that cloud you from, oh, this guy they brought in, like, he doesn't fit with what they would normally take. But a guy and if
they do go outside the parameters, it's usually in the later rounds, i.e. like a Kingsley and Barre in the 5th round or something like that. So
yeah.
But early in the draft, they tend to stick around their parameters more often than not.
A lot easier to break rules when you're paying day 3 guys what you're paying them compared to what you're going to pay a day 2 or a 1st-round guy.
Yeah,
very much.
Definitely makes sense. Also, I mean, to me, talking to pro scouts and talking to college scouts in terms of what their job is for an NFL team, like, they're looking for very different things. And I think you covered it really well in terms of, like, there was already a proven line of production with McKinney, so you don't really have those questions because any draft prospect, and that's including a Caleb Downs, who we talked about earlier, there's going to be the question of will he do this in the NFL? Because you haven't seen it, and until you see it, you never know. With a guy like McKinney entering free agency, you have seen him play against NFL talent. You have tape in the NFL. It is no longer will he do this. He has done this, so now will he work in our scheme? Like, that is really what the pro scouts look at in comparison to what a college scout is looking at and trying to project what this guy will do in our defense. So, I mean, I don't think and I don't follow the Packers like you guys do, obviously. Don't know the 3-cone rules for them. But I think it makes a lot of sense that if the Packers have a 3-cone rule for a defensive back, that they'd be willing to bend a little bit on that for a day 3 prospect or a free agent opposed to drafting one in the top 3 rounds.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of their and 3-cone goes for everybody on the team. They tend to stick with that for everybody, but yeah, they will later in the draft. Your day 3 guys, your UDFA's, are some of the ones that are more outside the box on that. But I want to throw a name out here real quick because I saw it up 3. It looks like the Packers visited with him on 3 separate occasions. I watched him. I wasn't too keen on him, but like I said, they've met with him 3 times. I don't know what that means. I don't know if there's something about him they like. I don't know if that means that he's got maybe a checkered history that they're trying to get cleared up or anything. But that's Bishop Fitzgerald from USC. I thought his hip flip looked a little bit stiff. Tackling for the most part was solid, but there were times that he could take a bad angle or two. And I thought his speed looked okay. Production-wise, I think was maybe mid-tier on things, but usually when the Packers are meeting more often than not with a player on multiple occasions, there's a good chance they view something, or like I said, there's something in his history that they're just trying to get cleared up and seeing if he's out or over it. So, Bishop Fitzgerald, where are you guys sitting on him?
I mean, I'm not going to speculate on why the Packers met with him 3 times or anything like that. I don't know what the Packers' typical process is when they go through a draft process for that kind of reason. I will say with him specifically, I do think he's a very interesting prospect that would make a lot of sense for a team to want to get extra work on because a lot of the expected testing numbers that were floated around for him had him faster than what he showed in Indy at the Combine. And typically when that kind of thing happens, you could see teams wanting to kind of let him test a little bit for themselves, see it live, because I mean, there's so many different weird stories that have happened during combine workouts that are forever going to say what they say, but they don't tell the full story. I think a good example is looking at like Jarvis Landry, the receiver, who hurts himself during his 40, and that's not instantly reported. He runs a really slow time, and he becomes a guy that a lot of teams brought in multiple times to really check on some things, whether that was meeting with him at the Combine, meeting him at some all-star games, bringing them in the building. So I do think that could be a reason, just because I've heard that from other teams, that he's a guy that they really expected to test better. So maybe they want to get some fresh eyes on him outside of that environment and see if those numbers are a little better.
Yeah, Mike, do you got anything to throw in there? Because like I said, I had never heard of him, but I was going through Easton's. Easton's got a database of Packer meetings, and they've met with him like 3 separate occasions. So I just
no, like what Destin is saying makes a lot of sense. Where it's like, yeah, and it's kind of funky because yeah, like you said, he's sort of the quote unquote other safety from USC in this draft because you know the name that a lot of people have more eyes on is Kamari Ramsey. But yeah, I do think when you've got that many visits in with the same guy, you are, you know, maybe it's a maybe something in the medicals turned up and you're checking to see like, is it progressing, you know, like let's say it's like some sort of surgery rehab or a soft tissue rehab, and it's like, okay, in 6 weeks you're supposed to be here kind of thing, and you know, you're kind of trying to get like the multiple landmark evaluations of a guy's rehab over an injury and stuff. Or as Destin said, the other side of it is like testing. You're coming in for personal workouts, all that kind of stuff. And there's also the chance that it is like, the off-field stuff. So we're never gonna, to be a fly on the wall in those kind of conversations. We'll never know for certain, but those are generally the three places I would imagine it as well. I honestly didn't watch a lot of USC, and yeah, like Destin said, I have heard more because I don't think he made the freaks list, but you do hear a lot just because my wife's a Chargers fan, so a lot of the reporters that you follow for Chargers news, they also do UCLA, USC area stuff, and Fitzgerald was one of the guys. Like I said, not Feldman's freak list necessarily, but you did hear oh, okay, this guy's expected to be this, this, and this, and then
definitely
it's
not a 4.55 speed.
Yeah,
definitely was expected to break into the 4.4s.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those where, like I said, and I say it on as many episodes as I can. I am not the person to ask oh, what does this guy look like he should run? I'm like Unger from The Longest Yard. He's fast, and he makes other fast guys look not fast. I'm not the guy who's gonna be able to say that's a 4.4 guy, that's a low 4.3 guy. I do not have the eye for that.
It's also probably the hardest drill to predict. When you're talking milliseconds, I mean that's just crazy stuff. I mean,
yeah.
So just for an example, but part of my scouting process, I typically put down an expectation for drills from what I see on film, just to see how it progresses. So just going through my notes and for Bishop Fitzgerald, I have a 4.46. So I have him breaking the 4.5s. 4.55. I mean, that sounds so much worse, right? I mean, it's 0.9 of a second worse, and when you're looking in the combine and reactions, that's a significant difference. But in reality, that's less than it takes for me to do anything.
For
me
down.
to blink, that's 0.09. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a very tough thing to get into, but him running a 4.46 would have looked a lot better to a lot of people than a 4.55. Whether I think that is hilarious when just talking about the logistics of it is one thing, but it is the reality of the sport.
Yep, exactly.
For sure. And the 40, and that's why when I watch these guys, especially before the combine, I'll say something well, speed looks good on film. Because that leaves me that little bit of wiggle room that if they go to the combine and run a 4.24, then I'd be yeah, see, I saw that on tape. And
if they run a 4.24, it better look good on film.
But I mean, I had that issue last year with R.J. Harvey when we were doing our running backs, because I was watching one where it was against Iowa State, and he broke a deep one, and he was going, and the next thing you know, this cornerback is just chasing him down. And it's okay, he doesn't have the greatest top speed, but then you look at the 40 times of the corner that chased him down, and he was in the 4.2s, 4.3s. It's okay, never mind. R.J. Harvey's got pretty good speed.
It happens. So as we move into the early day 3 range, two guys that have kind of had my eye on, one initially for sort of homer reasons, and another just because I've kind of always liked TCU safeties for some reason. But two guys in that round 4 range that I've had my eye on are Bud Clark and Zakee Wheatley. I'm a Michigan fan and grad, Destin, so Tyrone Wheatley's kid is playing college somewhere. I'm going to have my eye on him. Didn't test nearly as well as I thought. I didn't think he was some kind of elite athlete, but I didn't think he was going to run a 4.65 40, and I didn't think that showed up on film. But he's one of those, he kind of reminds me of how Adrian Amos used to play at Penn State, where he kind of just was all over the place, using a lot of different roles. And like I said, this is where the 4.65 surprised me, because I liked his click and close from depth, and I really liked the power that he brought when he would come downhill into the run alley and support the run. And with Clark, I like his range. The ball skills are solid, and then the big question for me is what does 188 pounds mean to a lot of different teams? And the Packers are one of the ones where they like their guys to have a certain amount of stockiness to them. They don't care for super skinny prospects, but round 4, maybe even 5 is where you're getting into that range where it's the rest of the player is a really good player, and like, what's a couple trips to Culver's stopping you from getting this guy? So how are Wheatley and how do Wheatley and Clark measure up for you as prospects?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start with Wheatley. To me, I think a lot of the teams that are going to be interested in McNeil Warren early are going to look at Wheatley as a guy who could be had for cheaper because he's going to be that early day 3. Maybe someone falls in love with him at the end of the 3rd, but I probably in day 3 in the 4th or 5th round, opposed to McNeil Warren, who's going to be a 1st or 2nd round pick. And I think they have a lot of similarities in terms of how they were used in college, of just being asked to do so many different things. For me, for McNeil Warren, the 40 wasn't that big of a deal, just because when I watched him, I really felt like his long speed was actually where he had an asset. And I think that kind of proved itself with the 40, and especially the 10-yard split, being as poor as it was for the position. I felt like that kind of verified that for me. But I really do think as the play gets going, he has plenty enough speed to make plays. And I think we always saw him around the ball at Penn State, and I think that's a big thing to watch, especially for guys that get asked to play in the box and get asked to play with their instincts a lot, like he did. So I like Wheatley a lot, and I think it makes a lot of sense if you're a team in on McNeil Warren early that you look at Wheatley as a guy that maybe I can get him in day 3 and get a similar production, maybe not as good instantly, but I think they could get a lot of good stuff out of him for what your dollar is worth, essentially, when looking at day 3. Bud Clark's another one. I mean, he's really fun tape to watch. And I think looking just throughout, he's a guy that, first of all, having proven ball production is just always going to be a win, because that's just one of the questions you're always going to ask. Can they turn the ball over at the next level? And it's one of the things that typically is going to translate well. If you track the ball well in college, you're typically going to track the ball well in the NFL. It might be harder to make plays against these NFL receivers, and it might be harder to kind of fool some of these quarterbacks at times. But if you're good at tracking the ball in the air, it's like riding a bike. Like you're going to be able to track a football if you can do it at the college level. And I think Bud Clark has a proven track record there. So if you're looking for a guy that's just going to excel in zone coverage, I think Bud is definitely a guy you should be high on. Probably going to be more likely a day 3 pick. But again, he's a guy I wouldn't bat an eye at if he went in the 3rd round.
Yeah, with Clark, and like you said, Destin, the one nuance with safety ball production in college is, again, I bring up Haha because it's like, I think Haha had like 5 or 6 interceptions his last year at Bama, but then when you would like go back and watch the film, they're in the box of, okay, he's in the area, but he's not really undercutting the route himself or making the play. It's like a lot of tipped pass plays, a lot of overthrows where he's like 5 yards behind the receiver. And so it gets into that whole like, okay, on one hand, he's not the guy forcing the turnover. And at the same time, as Packers fans, we have the past 10 to 15 years seen so many guys just drop golden opportunities to convert turnover opportunities into actual turnovers. And so it's like, when you want to split hairs, it's like, okay, like how much does that matter to you? Like the difference between creating the turnover and securing the turnover. That said, like you noted, Destin, Clark is the guy that is creating the turnover. And yes, the windows, they change as a process, coming from college to the NFL. But also, like, from a Packers point of view, the ideal is that you've got Micah Parsons coming back fully healthy, and he's going to create havoc, and you're going to have some off-target throws because your quarterback's in peril and all that kind of stuff. So you want that guy who's both going to be assignment sure and is going to have the wherewithal to understand routes and how to undercut and all that good stuff. So yeah, like I said, just take him to Culver's.
So I know we want to end pretty soon, but I just want to throw a couple of names out that the Packers have met with that maybe you guys can do like a rapid fire on what you think of them. They've met with James Madison safety Jacob Thomas, Charlotte safety Jacarius Connolly, and Kansas State safety VJ Payne. So any three of those really kind of stand out to you? They're probably going to be late day three, preferred UDFAs based on schools, but do any of those three kind of pop up on your radar?
So I love VJ Payne. I think he's probably the guy that like is gonna be my safety in terms of my guys this year. I think he's a guy that has proven ball production, but I also think he's a guy that plays so violently that he's just so fun to watch on film. He's a guy that's always trying to make a play. Once the ball is out of the quarterback's hand, he's not a guy that gives up because the ball didn't go to his target. He's a guy that wants to see the ball and attack the ball afterwards. And I think VJ Payne is a guy that I just have a hard time not seeing hit, man. I do. Like, I just have a hard time not seeing him be a successful NFL player. Even if it ends up being just like a special teams ace because someone finds a way to turn his physicality into that realm of the game. I just think VJ Payne is a guy who has great size, tested really well. He has really fun film. Looks like a really smart player that really understands offenses. He's a guy that I keep seeing people say he's going to go day three. I have a round 3 grade on VJ Payne. He's a guy that I think is just very talented. I'm very excited to see where he lands. He plays both safety spots. Some people are going to tell you he should play free safety just because of the coverage ability. I really do think he's at his best when you can just lay him in the box, let him just look at the field, make instinctual plays, and just attack. So I would love to see a VJ Payne next to a guy like Xavier McKinney. So I would love to see him in Green Bay personally. But yeah, I'm pretty high on VJ Payne.
Yeah, like I said, I know they visited with him. I didn't get a chance to watch him much, but what do you think of the idea? Because I kind of caught this on one of friend of show Jake Shavink and JJ Leahy's show that Jake also seemed to think that maybe VJ could be a corner in the next level. So is that something that maybe could possibly happen with him too?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has the size for it. I mean, you're looking at a guy that 6'3", 206 pounds, has really good arms at 33 3/4, tested really well at either position. So I could see somebody wanting to test him outside, especially because of the positional value at corner opposed to safety. I still think his best role at the next level is going to be in the box, just because of how I think he operates when his instincts are just what he's at his disposal of. But I do think if you put him at corner, he's going to be one of the better tackling corners on your team. And I do think that matters for a lot of teams, maybe not as much for some. But I do think against the run as a corner, he'd be excellent right away. So I think he could play either spot. I think that's the best part about him. He kind of played everywhere at Kansas State. Has snaps at corner, has snaps at both safety positions, has great size, so you don't have to question if he's going to be able to cover a tight end on a jump ball play. So very versatile player that I'm really excited to kind of see what role he kind of carves out. Selfishly, because I just want to see him hit people more, I want him to play in the box.
He does bring a ton of bricks with him into the contact area. Yeah, a lot of fun. And like you said, we're really entering that era where guys are like, where more coordinators are experimenting with moving different body types around in the defensive backfield. And you look at Payne, and it's like he's that boundary corner who you just like. And what I like about his film at corner is he understands that the sideline is his friend, and he's just gonna ride the receiver out there within the rules of the game. And like, okay, quarterback, you want to make a throw? You've got like a 6x6 inch window to fit the ball in, or it's or it's incomplete is your best case scenario, or I'm batting it to myself or batting it to a teammate for an interception. So yeah, like he's a really intriguing prospect. And these are the kind of prospects that I really enjoy in the draft process, because we're talking about a late round 3, early round 4 type of guy where you're like, yeah, like the upside is pretty exciting at this position. So yeah, this is where it gets really fun for me.
the way you guys are talking him up, I'd take him at 52 because the Packers need a corner that tackles. We went all season without corners that could tackle, so a corner that's not afraid to hit somebody, it's a plus for me. It's a yes for me, dog.
If the Packers want to use a second-round pick on him just so my agenda on him being underrated hits, I mean, power to them.
All right.
The only thing I'll mention about Thomas is I thought his backpedal and his hip flip were one of the smoothest I've ever seen. I mean, he was basically floating when he was doing his backpedal and hip flip. I know Mike's going to end it here pretty soon because we want to cut off, but I'm not going to let it go that easy because there are two guys that I got to talk about.
I was getting you there.
One of them is my homer pick. The other one is one that I really like from what I saw and could be another one that could be a late draft. So I'll talk about him real quick. Tanner Wall from BYU. He had a smooth back pedal. I thought he was a solid tackler. Maybe not be the fastest, but was serviceable. He was one that I thought tracked the ball really well. It was basically one of those see ball, make play, see ball, get ball. And he tested really good. Obviously I don't know anything about outside of that. BYU is not a school that I kind of watch a lot of, but I did see him. I did really like what I saw out of him. He could possibly be maybe a day 3 guy for them. But I will talk about Xavier Wampa. The, Hawkeye fan in me has to support the Hawkeye player. I will say about Wampa that he never lived up to his hype. He's one of the very few 5-star recruits that come out of the state of Iowa, let alone go to the University of Iowa. And he never really lived up to that. He was always a freakish athlete, and I believe he tested really well at the combine, but you saw flashes of it in his time at the University of Iowa. He did start some games as a true freshman, had some time since day one. He has limited stats, but that's about all I can. The only other thing I can throw out is like I always do with University of Iowa guys. They're blue collar guys. They're the type that they're going to show up. They're going to put in the work. Hopefully, somebody can take Xavier and finally mold his athletic ability into what he should have been. But coming out as, like I said, very few times do 5-star athletes pop up out of the state of Iowa, and even fewer times do those 5-star athletes end up at the University of Iowa. He was one of the few, and it never lived up to that ranking.
So I was searching for this because I had a scout text me talking about him specifically, and I wanted to see exactly what he said. So I got a text this draft cycle, and the text read, he's built like and tested like a former 5-star. Why didn't he play like one? I do think the frame and the testing matter. And I do think the fact that now, whether it's right or should be this way, high school rankings follow you all the way to the draft process. Like, being a former 5-star recruit matters, and scouts care about it. The fact that it was there and maybe it just wasn't untapped in college, like, that matters to a lot of NFL teams. So I do think there's going to be guys that are really big fans of him, and we'll see what that looks like. I think he's going to get drafted, and I think we'll see it happen on day 3. But I do think having that foundation of his size and what he tested like is it matters more than some people might think.
Do you hear that, Mike? I have the same thoughts as an NFL scout.
No, not going to go against anything there. And I totally agree. Like, this is one of those where if the Packers believe in their safety coaching, this is a guy that you're like, hey, we can get him round 6, round 7. You're sort of like, and at absolute worst, this is sort of like a Kendall Donnerson or like a Jeff Janis pick where it's like, the RAS card is basically a 10. Just take him and see if you can teach him how to football better than he did in college. And I'm always up for those when you're in the dredges of the late 6th and 7th round. Like, just start throwing the darts. let them fly, let them lie wherever they end up going. Destin, thank you so much. Were there any other prospects that you wanted to have a TED Talk over, or was VJ Payne atop your list for guys that you absolutely had to make sure were mentioned today?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you gave me the floor to talk about VJ Payne made this podcast worth it. Doesn't matter what else happened. But I mean, I like day 3 a lot. Like, just to go quick fire at you. Robert Spears Jennings out of Oklahoma, another guy, day 3, tested really well. Think he's going to be a special teams ace at the very minimum, and I think he has a little bit of upside to carve out a role in the NFL. I think Deshaun Singleton from Nebraska is another guy that I like. I like his film a lot, and really interested to see where he fits in terms of trying to carve out a role on defense. Maybe not as much of a special teams guy early on, but I do think he has a lot of talent. And then, I mean, I think somebody's going to take Lorenzo Styles. I think somebody's going to bet on the athletic profile. Having a brother that's going to be drafted as high as he's going to get drafted, and Sonny. I think it'll be interesting to see what his draft stock looks like come April, end of April. We're already in April, man. The year is flying by, guys.
Yeah, I was just looking at our tentative schedule, and we've only got 2 more weeks of this.
Hey, that's a good thing though. The draft cycle needs to be shorter. Okay, if I'm going to leave you guys with anything, that's the end. The draft cycle needs to be shorter. Fix that, the NFL.
And on that note, we will keep this episode as short and concise as Destin is hoping the NFL will keep the draft cycle moving forward. But Destin, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. We are very happy to hear that the highlight was you going on your VJ Payne TED Talk. Where can all of our listeners find all of your work and your eventual VJ Payne, why he will be a Hall of Famer because so-and-so drafted him piece?
Yeah, I mean, anybody can follow me on X, Twitter, whatever you call it nowadays, at the Destin Adams. Not at the Dustin Adams. You're not going to find me there, but at the Destin Adams on X. And then you can find any work on the NFL draft. And if you want to talk about the Indianapolis Colts or read about the Indianapolis Colts for any reason ever, I have you covered over there at A to Z Sports.
Hey, I got a soft spot for the Colts just because of Dallas Clark and Bob Sanders. So yeah, we're good on that.
So yeah, Destin, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking out the time to talk to the two of us, these two loonies, as we go over the Packers draft plans. But we really appreciate it. And you can check us out at Ohana_Packers on Twitter, at Ohana Packers Edition on Instagram. Please check us out on Facebook. We are still trying to get to 100 followers there so that we can do our live streams on Facebook as well as on YouTube. Once we get to 100 followers, we're going to do our drawing. Please hurry up. The perishables that I said, they're still good. They're still good, but the more time goes by, Joe is going to have to keep checking those a little bit more closely to make sure he doesn't have to enjoy them all on his lonesome. So just help Joe out.
I'll go share him with my new favorite restaurant in town.
So help Joe out there. Please follow us on your favorite podcasting apps. Give us a like and a subscribe if you're enjoying what you're hearing. And I don't believe we got one for today's episode, but we have been getting some questions written in or topics to be broached by our guests. So please keep those coming along, both for the rest of our draft preview sessions and for any of our other episodes. We really want to be in touch with our listeners. So on that note, Destin, thank you one more time. Go Pack Go, and aloha!
Packers fans out here to stay. Cheeseheads green and gold all day. Jordan Love lead us to the bay. Every game we find a way. Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for green and gold gonna glow. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown.